southern border. Now, make no mistake about it, every person, okay, that's coming through our southern border is paying thousands of dollars to the drug cartels to be smuggled here. We're talking about $32 million a week that the drug cartels are profiting as a result of the policies of Joe Biden. That to me is unconscious. We have always been a generous nation. We've always been one that has welcomed immigrants, my parents included. But there needs to be a process, there needs to be order, it needs to be sustainable, and we certainly, as the United States government, should not be encouraging people to take a dangerous, treacherous journey where they are being exploited, they are being raped, they are being who knows what else, and certainly not one that is enriching the drug cartels who then turn around and are poisoning Americans, where we're seeing a record number of fentanyl deaths, over 100,000 as a result. That's the bottom line. Now, New York City is facing this crisis because our mayor decided that, misinterpreted rather, the right to shelter policy. We know that this is a court decree. It was intended for homeless New Yorkers. I've been saying that from the beginning. This was a mistake to allow this to happen in New York. It is, as the mayor says himself, is destroying New York City. It's certainly bankrupting New York City. We are seeing proposals for services to be cut across the board, and it's costing the taxpayers, the hard-working taxpayers. They get up every single day, they go to work, they're struggling to provide for their own families, okay? Food, shelter, energy, at a time of rising inflation. And this mayor is forcing them to continue to foot this unsustainable bill. And to make matters worse, we're seeing the individuals at some of these sites even committing crimes on top of it, where the city is refusing to cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement. They have cooperated with zero detainer requests for individuals that commit crime. So think about this. Joe Biden opens the borders, and his own immigration and customs enforcement is saying that certain people are too dangerous to be here in the city of New York, and they're issuing warrants. By the way, it's only very few circumstances, maybe less than 200, because of the open border policy of this president. And the city is still not cooperating with those individuals. So what have we seen? We've seen, in some cases, there's been robberies and shoplifting, but there's been many assaults. There have been police officers assaulted. There have been unlicensed and drunk driving. There have been domestic violence at this particular location. We've seen a murder at another migrant encampment at a park in Roosevelt Island. We have seen multiple stabbings. This is just unacceptable by anyone that has any common sense. And so we're saying that this has to come to an end. The mayor needs to stop misinterpreting this right to shelter. And by the way, I had a judge reaffirm that. It's not just Nicole Malliotakis saying right to shelter doesn't extend to New Yorkers. We went and sued at St. John's Villa regarding Staten Island, and that facility was shut down. And in the judgment, the decision, the judge said very clearly that right to shelter does not extend to citizens of other countries. Now think about it with your own common sense. How could it? If right to shelter is extended to people from other countries, that means there's 8 billion people on the planet. If they all came to New York City, they would be entitled to free housing. And how does that make any sense? So by just common sense, you know that the right to shelter does not extend to the citizens of other countries. But here in particular, while we wait for Chuck Schumer to pass our Border Security Act, or his own bill, if he doesn't like our bill, pass your own bill so we can reconcile the differences. We can't negotiate with nothing. So we're waiting for Senator Schumer to pass some type of border security and immigration measure in the Senate so we can proceed. We've been waiting since May. Okay. By the way, that bill, our border security bill, HR 2, would resolve this problem. It would stop it immediately because it undoes the executive orders of the president that created this situation. Aside from that, after hearing complaints from the residents in the surrounding area and from my colleagues of both parties, Republican and a Democrat here, November 30th, And it passed with bipartisan support. Again, what I'm talking about here is all bipartisan, right? I'm joined by a Republican and Democrat saying that Floyd Bennett Field, this migrant encampment needs to close. And the legislation I passed to close it passed with bipartisan support. And yet Chuck Schumer, who represents Brooklyn, represents New York, refuses to even allow a vote on this bill, which I know this bill would pass the Senate if he brought it to the floor for a vote, because the majority of the people in the Senate do not feel that our federal land should be used and turned into migrant encampments. They are for the enjoyment of the community. Not to mention, by the way, how they went about this illegally and what we're pursuing in court to also overturn this decision. Why? Because they did not follow NEPA law. This is a open space. This is a protected space. This is a national park. There's certain environmental standards, and they just ignored all of it. Did no environmental impact statement. By the way, just like congestion pricing, all right? Think about it. When the Democrats that control our city and state have an agenda, all of a sudden, the environmental laws don't matter when it suits what they're trying to achieve. And we're seeing the same thing happening here where they're violating federal laws, and that's why the three of us elected officials are suing. I'd like to introduce, and I'll just say one last thing, James Madison High School. The idea that that was the backup plan, that they were going to push students to go remote, for who knows how long. I mean, at the time it was just for one day, but it could have been extended if there was a hurricane here, like Hurricane Sandy. To take away our school, that is shameful. And Chuck Schumer, who graduated from James Madison High School, I think should have a little more compassion for the students and the parents who are citizens here that pay taxes, and probably most of them voted and elected him. I want to turn it over to my colleague from the City Council, Joanne Ariel.
I want to thank Nicole for putting this together, and also for all of you coming out to cover this very important issue. We've been saying from day one that Floyd Bennett Field was the wrong place to house migrants. But really what we're saying is we don't need any more migrants coming into New York, and if we continue to incentivize them to come, they will continue to come. We're getting thousands per week into our city bus stations, into Jersey, taking trains to our city. And now, yesterday, the mayor noted that he's allotting $77 million in contract with hotels to house migrant families. If we don't do something to stop this flow, it is going to continue. We have been asking Joe Biden, we have been begging Senator Schumer, we need the borders closed, but if the borders will not close, then we have to do something that's going to save New York City, that's going to save the surrounding communities. We have complaints from the adjacent community, which I represent in Bell Harbor, Neponset, and in Broad Channel, where there has been crime and illegal scooters on mopeds on sidewalks, and potential break-ins in homes, and begging at the doors, asking for money, holding up their phones and saying, I'm a migrant from Floyd Bennett Field, please give me money. This has to stop. We can no longer go on like this. Our city cannot sustain it. Where are we coming up with the $77 million? Where's the state coming up with the money that Governor Hochul promised? I'll tell you where it's coming from. Your pockets. That's where it's coming from. It's going to come from your raising taxes. And what's really the result? We have hotels that can no longer be utilized for any type of commerce coming in, any type of people visiting our city. Who's going to want to go into a hotel that is a split use of a migrant shelter and a hotel for people who are coming here to enjoy the sights of New York City? It's just not going to happen. It didn't happen at the Row Hotel. It's destroyed the Roosevelt Hotel and any other hotel that migrants were brought into. And it is destroying our national park. We've complained there has been dirt, there has been clothing strewn all over, there has been garbage strewn all over. And it's unfair that parks, the National Park Service, the City of New York, and their essential services have to be burdened with picking up after. It's not fair, especially when there was initially cuts to our essential services, which have since been restored, but for how long? Not just for the first round, but what will we lose in the second and third round of cuts? This is something that if Joe Biden doesn't want to look at it, then we as a city and a state must look at it. And Nicole Malliotakis is right. We must interpret the right to shelter as what it is meant to be for our homeless New Yorkers. Because we've forgotten about the 65,000 homeless New Yorkers that were here when Bill de Blasio left office. Where are they? Did they evaporate? Did our homeless veterans evaporate? And if we have $77 million to spare, let's put it into making sure that we have better immigration reform and make people who have been waiting 10 and 11 years, be sure they become citizens. But they've been pushed back. They've been pushed back on the line, and migrants who have entered illegally are being pushed ahead so that they can gain their citizenship or an expedited work authorization. That's not fair. That's not how America was built. America was built on migration. My own grandparents came here, but they came here through the right channels, and they came here lawfully. Everyone who's come here came here unlawfully, and a small percentage have applied for asylum, and a very small and an even smaller percentage have applied for work authorization. Why? Because they're riding around on motor scooters and have cars with paper plates, and they're terrorizing our roads and our sidewalks, and they're even kind of dipping into the deliverista business because they're delivering for all of these delivery services, which we're now taking to task at the city council that they should have better restrictions. So I stand with everything that the Congresswoman said, and I know that Floyd Bennett Field is not the place to have a migrant base camp. It is a national park visited by 1 million people per year. That's what it was intended for, and that's what it should be used for. I know that people may think of this as just a dilapidated runway, but it's our national park. It's our Yosemite. It's our Yellowstone. And we want it back. Thank you.
Joanne brought up an important point about how inundated the immigration system is as a result of what this president has allowed. In New York, we're looking to at least a decade-long wait to hear your case. And if you look at the stats, and I urge you all to do that, more than 50% of the individuals are denied. Okay, they're not legitimate asylum seekers. Okay, they're attempting to gain access and entry into the country by claiming asylum when they do not qualify. And who does that hurt? It hurts the people who actually do qualify. I met with one of those individuals yesterday. I have a constituent on Staten Island. She's here. She's came legally. She has work authorization. She's been waiting for asylum since 2017. And her asylum case is clear cut, quite frankly. She's from Belarus. She was a political persecuted individual. And she has now been delayed further because the president, again, has a last-in, first-out policy, which is prioritizing the people who are paying the cartels and coming over the southern border. And by the way, the cartels are the ones that are telling them to claim asylum to get in. And that is just so wrong that we're continuing to put individuals who came the wrong way ahead of those who came the right way and have been patiently waiting. With that, I want to turn over to my colleague, Floyd, who's happy to serve in the New York State Assembly with somebody that I've respected and continue to respect. I appreciate her standing up. And this is her district, so please.
Place for any man, woman, or child to be in. We have a lawsuit that's happening, and we are waiting for the judge to make his decision. However, what we're seeing here is pure rhetoric. We have the federal government who chose to turn a blind eye to a national crisis. Some said it's a state of emergency, but the federal government has not called it a state of emergency. We are seeing that government in New York has taken it upon themselves to throw money at a federal issue. Our governor has outlined $2.4 billion for the migrant services. Miraculously, that money was found. Every taxpayer in New York State should be appalled. It is concerning because this type of reckless decision is continuing to divide our New Yorkers who call this place home. We have to make sensible, common sense decisions. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at this, if the border is not closed, it's not going to stop. And since when we have an open border policy? Since when? What are we doing here? The southern states, this is their everyday issue that they have to deal with. And today, it has come to our backyard in the most residential part of Brooklyn and Queens. A national crisis at our backyard. And some feel as though the right to shelter, we should shelter the world. Whereas our veterans and other individuals that are facing mental health crisis are out there on our street. We heard about James Madison. Guess what? I am a parent of a child who attends James Madison. And that day when they choose to use James Madison, I was in Albany, while the governor was talking about the state of the state, bringing remarks. I traveled from Albany straight to James Madison, only to find out the next day the school would be closed and my daughter would be home being taught remotely. Do you really think she was taught remotely? No, she wasn't. It was a day to make up work. We have had way more severe weather conditions where there was severe flooding, people were abandoned, children couldn't get home, and the schools wasn't closed. Nor is James Madison a part of the evacuation route to house anyone. So you come up with things as you can, and you displace the community. And some might say, no, this is God's work. So haven't we not been doing God's work all the time? By caring for our homeless and caring for our veterans and caring for our seniors? How all of a sudden we're doing God's work? No, what you're doing is not God's work. You have taken up something that the federal government have failed to address, and you have brought it in our backyards. For my residents, and everyone residents here, including Staten Island and places by Creedmoor in Queens, to be benefactors of the lawlessness that we're seeing. From panhandling to shoplifting, from children being kept away from school to beg on the street. You ask yourself, is that the American dream? You ask yourself, did you travel miles upon miles and pay whoever to bring you through the border for the American dream? Every other person that is waiting patiently for a green card or work authorization or a social security number, should we make a public announcement today to say, hey, let's get a bus, let's take you to the border, and you can come back since we have an open border policy. Should we do that? What we are seeing here and what we are doing here is creating further division, whether it's with New Yorkers, the taxpayers, the American citizens, or the law-abiding person who is trying to get their life to seek the American dream. We need common sense legislation, and the federal government to stand up. Don't use, oh, it's the Democrat or it's the Republican. Forget about that. You want to say, oh, Trump had the borders closed. Well, thank God he had the borders closed. Because again, if we need to go into Canada or to any other country, there is a policy at their border. When you come through JFK or LaGuardia, there is a process that we have to follow. So why are they not following? So, to my colleague, I support you, I support the bill, and I hope that this lease at Floyd Bennett Field can be revoked. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have someone from law enforcement here who has been a great partner. As a federal representative, I'm very proud to represent the U.S. Park Police, and we have today the chairman of the Fraternal Order of Police for the U.S. Park Police, that is Ken Spencer, who can talk a little bit about the public safety and the understaffing.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm just going to touch on some of the concerns that we have as law enforcement here. As I said before, we only have 2 law enforcement officers assigned on duty here on Floyd Bennett Field, Police Park, and many other places as well. So you can see how large this area is. Those 2 officers are supposed to be dedicated to the local communities and the visitors that we have here at the United States, at Floyd Bennett Field and the National Park that we protect. What we have behind us now is, I'm being told there's actually closer to 3,000 people in that tent. And our patrol has been diverted from taking care of what we're supposed to be taking care of to a lot of the incidents that have occurred since this tent has been put up. We've had a bomb threat against the tent itself that didn't come to anything. We've had unpermitted events, 200, 300 people setting up makeshift marketplaces and selling things illegally, parties, loud music. If you look around, you can also see all the trash that's come up since this tent has popped up. And we've also had incidents like warrants. We've had warrants in that tent where the NYPD warrant squad was supposed to come here and take somebody out of there that had a warrant for their arrest, and they were denied entry by the contract security guards that you see behind me. This is U.S. Park Police federal jurisdiction. We've been denied entry, and there are medical emergencies and all kinds of other incidents that have occurred inside that tent. We've had children that have had medical emergencies. We had a child swallow bleach, and they delayed our entry in there because they didn't want our officers to gain access to that facility. So these are huge concerns that we have. The spring and summer months are coming, and as you know, this place gets really busy during that time, especially out on the beaches. Of course, right now it's cold out, so you won't see much activity, but I can guarantee you once it starts getting warmer, they are going to intermingle with the local community, and some of the incidents that the Congresswoman and your city leaders here have talked about, it's going to increase once they're out and about a lot. So I will be here if you have any questions afterwards, but that's some of the issues that I wanted to bring to light to everybody else here.
Think about how insane that is. There was a warrant for someone's arrest, and they couldn't even make the arrest because they were denied entry into the facility. It's just completely outrageous. With that, I'll take questions.